Steve here at blessedhopeforever.com. While I'm waiting for that event that will occur well before my conscious mind has time to register it, I'd like to talk about, with what little time we may have left, a few topics. I don't usually put more than one topic in a video, but I'm going to break that rule. Talk about the first lunar sighting. I want to talk about on seeing the day approaching. I want to talk about the Shmita cycles. And then I want to talk about some really weird thing. I want to talk about 3-eye atlas. You may be familiar with that by now, and how I think that relates to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So in looking at the first lunar crescent subject, Feast of Trumpets, sighting of the new moon in Israel, the date and the time of the first sighting, I want to point out a few things. According to astronomical data for Jerusalem, Israel, the next new moon will occur on September 21, 2025 at 10:54 p.m. their time. But it's important to distinguish between the astronomical new moon, which is the exact moment of the conjunction of the sun and the moon, and the first sighting of the lunar crescent, which is when the new moon begins on the Hebrew calendar. The first possible sighting of the crescent moon would be on the night following the astronomical new moon. The astronomical new moon will occur on September 21, 2025 at 10:54 p.m. in Jerusalem. The first sighting of the lunar crescent, which marks the beginning of the new month on the Hebrew calendar, is a separate event that typically happens after the astronomical new moon. Based on visibility predictions for Jerusalem, the crescent moon could be visible on September 23, 2025. And I say could be visible because there's a distinction, folks, between a predictable astronomical event and a variable on-the-ground human observation. The first sighting of the crescent moon, which occurs after this alignment, is a different matter entirely. Its visibility is not a guaranteed consequence of the moon's position alone. It's affected by a combination of physical and environmental factors. The thin crescent of the new moon is extremely faint, and it appears very low on the horizon just after sunset. Sighting it successfully is dependent on a number of conditions that can and do vary. The most common reason for a failed sighting is weather. Clouds, haze, dust, or air pollution can easily obscure the very thin crescent. Even a perfectly clear sky in one location may be hazy or cloudy just a few miles away. The moon's orbit is elliptical, and its speed and distance from Earth change. This means that the time it takes for the moon to move far enough from the sun to become visible varies from month to month. The angle between the sun and the moon, known as the elongation, must be at least 7 degrees, and often more for a naked eye sighting. If the moon sets too soon after the sun, or is too low on the horizon, it'll be lost in the twilight glow. And the curvature of the Earth and the observer's latitude and longitude significantly affect the viewing conditions. Someone in a higher elevation or with a clear, unobstructed western horizon has a better chance of seeing the crescent than someone in a valley or a built-up urban area. Therefore, while the astronomical event is precisely calculable, the human experience of seeing it is subject to the unpredictable nature of our planet's atmosphere and the specific physical location of the observer. This is why official calendars for many religious traditions that rely on the new moon sighting, such as the Hebrew and Islamic calendars, often use this could be language, acknowledging the observational uncertainty. So, in short, because it is physically sighted, unknown atmospheric conditions prevent accurate timing. The timing of the new moon itself is astronomically predictable. However, the visibility of the first lunar crescent is not. It depends on a variety of observational factors with unknown atmospheric conditions. So the physical sighting by an observer introduces the variability. So based on clear weather conditions, what would the lunar crescent visibility date and time be? Well, I went and looked for that. Given a scenario with perfectly clear weather conditions in Israel, the first visible sighting of the lunar crescent would be on the evening of September 22, 2025. Okay? The astronomical new moon, the moment that the moon is in conjunction with the sun and therefore invisible, occurs at 10:54 p.m. on September 21. Okay, this means that the moon is only a few hours past conjunction and very close to the sun's position in the sky during the sunset on September 22. So under ideal conditions, I have no idea what the weather's going to be like then, but an observer would need a clear, unobstructed view of the western horizon shortly after sunset. The crescent would be exceptionally thin and low in the sky. That would be Israel time, of course. The evening of September 22, 2025 is in Israel's local time. The date and time adjusted to my time here in Oklahoma would be, based on the time zone difference, the date and time would be September 22, 2025 at approximately 10:36 in the morning. That's Central Daylight Time. This is because I'm 8 hours behind Israel. The new moon crescent would be sighted in Israel shortly after sunset, which is around 6:36 p.m. on that day, and that time translates to the morning of the same day in Oklahoma. Now, East Coast, Eastern Daylight Time, the time would be approximately 11:36 a.m. on September 22, 2025. Israel's 7 hours ahead of the East Coast. As far as the West Coast, if you're out in California, the time would be approximately 8:36 a.m. on September 22, because Israel's would be 10 hours ahead of the West Coast. So talk about 9:23 all you want. Just know for us, it's 9:22 here in the U.S., and I do not think that God is going by the astronomical date and time, but the observational time in Israel. Now, I want to talk a little bit about seeing the day approaching. The word there in Hebrews 10:25 is blepo in the Greek. I want to talk about that a little bit. It's the plural form of that word should be understood as you are seeing or you are perceiving. It isn't just a passive observation, but a state of awareness or recognition, and all the more as you see the day approaching. There's too many skeptics out there that says that we can't see what's coming, and that's not true. The word here signifies a heightened awareness or a clear perception of an ongoing reality. It's an exhortation based on the fact that we already see it drawing near. The author's telling the readers to encourage one another and to do so more because of their current state of observation. They can tell that the final day is getting closer. This seeing is not with their physical eyes, but with a spiritual or prophetic sense. It's an internal understanding born from the events and circumstances of their time. In this case, our time, I believe. Blepo is a very common word for to see. Its use here is distinct from other Greek verbs. God could have used the word harao. That denotes a more direct, sometimes supernatural or intellectual seeing. It's the root of the word where we get drama, meaning vision. If the author had used this, it might have implied a more spiritual or direct revelation. Theoreo, that word implies to look at, to observe, to contemplate, and that suggests a careful and deliberate scrutiny. And if used in this verse, it would have changed the meaning from an ongoing state of awareness to a more intentional act of watching for signs. But he used blepo. God used the word blepo. It grounds the exhortation in the shared and evident reality that the readers are already experiencing. They are all seeing the days approach, whether consciously or not, and this shared perception is the motivation for their continued fellowship and encouragement. We are to encourage one another as the day draws near. Okay, now I want to talk about Shmita cycles. It's not something I've talked about a lot, but I want to touch on that. There's something interesting about this. 7-year cycles from 2001 to 2029 because they reveal historical economic crises or downturns, all in the month of September, 2029 being the midpoint if we're raptured this year. I'm going to put these up on the screen so you can see them. The pattern that we see is a sequence of significant, globally impactful economic events occurring 7 years apart, each one having a notable connection to the month of September. I find this pretty interesting because while the specific nature and the scale of the events vary, from major crises in 2001 and 2008 to periods of high volatility and major policy shifts in the other years, it just makes for a compelling, what you call coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. You got the stock market crash in 2001, market downturn that followed the attacks on September 11th. The New York Stock Exchange, the American Stock Exchange were closed for 4 trading days after the attacks. And then when they reopened on September 17, the market experienced a significant drop. Okay? That's something that many of us will probably remember. The global financial crisis in 2008, that's kind of a little more complex event. But, while the crisis began to unfold earlier with signs of distress in the U.S. housing market in 2007, the most significant moment that triggered a worldwide panic was the bankruptcy of the Lehman Brothers, a major investment bank, who wound up filing for bankruptcy on September 15, 2008. Okay, now, I'm not going to bore you with all the rest of the details here, but on each of these Shmita years, but there's definitely a pattern, without question. And where that pattern goes back for the last 7 is pretty interesting. At least I found it interesting, and I want to kind of touch on that. So the years are 2001, 2008, 2015, 2022, 2029. So as you know, I hope you do, we're in 2025. The next Shmita year will begin in September 2028, end in September 2029. Okay, that's the midpoint on our timeline, which ends the Antichrist reign, begins the 1290, 1335 day counts to the kingdom. So based on the 7-year cycle of Shmita years, the next one after 2028, 2029 will be in 2035, 2036. Okay? So, the 2 Shmita years before the 01 cycle would be 1993, 1994, and 1986, 1987. So the period from the beginning of the 1994 Shmita year to the end of 2036, that encompasses 7 full Shmita cycles, okay? 1993 in Jewish history. What happened? Well, the most significant event in Jewish history in 1993 was the signing of the Oslo Accords on September 13. This was a groundbreaking moment because the Israeli government and the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, they formally recognized each other for the first time. There was this handshake for peace. The agreement was signed at the White House with President Bill Clinton presiding over that, and there was this historic handshake between the Israeli Prime Minister, Rabin, and the PLO chairman, Arafat, and that was supposed to usher in a new area, of peace. Okay, the Accords established the framework for a Palestinian Authority to govern parts of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip with the goal of a permanent peace settlement to be negotiated over a 5-year interim period. Well, we know what happened to that. And we have Israel and the Vatican established diplomatic relations. That's in 1993. So it's interesting to go back through those 7-year cycles and see how that, all these that landed in the month of September, all were absolutely, without a doubt, historically documented. They were related to significant downturns in the economy. That's I guess just my point, as well as other things. Okay, now I want to talk about this weird thing in the sky. Some of you probably, are aware of it already. I've talked a little bit about it, haven't talked a whole lot about it. There's a whole lot of videos out there on it, 3-eye atlas. And this is what's weird about it. We don't know what it's acting like. I mean, we know it's not acting like a comet. It is one of the 3 interstellar objects that we've discovered. That's for the reason for the word, the I letter, interstellar, 3-eye atlas. We don't know what this thing is. I mean, it's really having, we're finding these astronomers are really scratching their heads over everything that's occurring with this object. And what interests me is the timing of it all. So this 3-eye atlas, a fascinating interstellar visitor, has shown some truly unusual behavior, color changes being one of them. This is what caught my interest. Okay? I want to talk about first the cold black initial state of that thing, whatever it is. When it was first discovered, it was a very faint object, and its initial appearance was consistent with a typical distant comet. If you were to imagine it's sitting on the Earth, its solid nucleus sitting on Earth, it would be a very dark, sooty, cold black color. This is because comets are generally composed of a mix of ice, dust, and rock, and the outer layers are typically covered in a dark, carbon-rich material. This is what astronomers call, a low albedo surface. It doesn't reflect a whole lot of sunlight. And then we had this red glow. Just in the first few weeks after its discovery, as it began to get closer to the sun and warm up, its coma was observed to have a reddish hue. And this reddish color is not uncommon for comets. It's caused by the scattering of sunlight off of tiny dust particles in the coma. Okay, they were scattering more red light than blue light, giving the comet a reddish appearance. Now, this suggested that the comet was beginning to wake up and shed some of its outermost layers of dust. And then there's a green, emerald green transformation. The most significant and surprising event was the comet's transition from red to green. This is a very rare and dramatic change for a comet. The green color is is not due to reflected sunlight, but it's a phenomenon known as gas emission fluorescence. So as the comet gets closer to the sun, the intense solar radiation heats up its nucleus, causing volatile ices to sublimate and release various gases. So in the case of this particular thing, this green glow is a telltale sign of the presence of specific molecules. Don't need to go into those, but when these molecules are exposed to solar radiation, they become excited, and then they emit light at specific wavelengths, with the strongest emissions falling in the green part of the spectrum. So there's a scientific reason for the color changes, folks. Okay, but what I'm listen to me here a minute. Okay, God works through science. God works through natural laws. Okay. It appears to be changing in a way that is not fully understood, and the steep increase in gas production is highly unusual for a comet at its distance from the sun. But now we have the expected white appearance. It's expected to turn white. Okay? There's a prediction that it will turn white. That's based on the idea that as it gets even closer to the sun, a different thing will dominate. The green glow from the gas emission will continue, but the comet is expected to also become significantly brighter from a massive increase in dust production. As more and more dust particles are released from the nucleus, they'll begin to dominate the scattered sunlight. And this massive outflow of dust, which scatters all colors of light more or less equally, will cause the overall appearance of the comet to shift toward a more natural white color. The sheer volume of dust would effectively drown out the specific green emissions from the gas molecules, and this white phase would signify the comet's peak activity as it makes its closest approach to the sun. Okay, now, so what colors are we looking at? Black, red, green, and white. This prophetic series of color changes from the initial dark state to a reddish, dusty glow to a vibrant green gas emission and finally to a brilliant white dust-dominated comet is not a coincidence, folks, and it makes 3I Atlas truly unique and an important object for astronomers studying the composition of interstellar comets as well as us, particularly since these four colors are the four horsemen of the apocalypse and mirror the colors of Islamic nation flags. There, I said it. Okay? Black, famine, the beginning. Okay? All right? Red, war. The shift to red signifies the unleashing of conflict and destruction. It's a viable, it's a visible, fiery sign of turmoil. Then green. There's your death and pestilence. The green color, with its association with decay and toxicity, symbolizes the spreading of a plague or a more insidious form of death. It's a sign that the consequences of war are taking root and growing. And then you have the white. That's conquest. That's the climax. Okay, the final brilliant white phase represents the culmination of this process. The final conquering force that brings everything to an end. All right, this is mine. This blew my mind when I and I don't even know where it came from. I've always followed this thing in the sky. I don't know, is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it Superman? Nobody knows for sure what it is. So I was curious. I was caught up in all the curiosity of it. And I've previously done videos on how that those four colors are associated with the Antichrist system. You can go back in the prophetic playlist and you, without too much difficulty, you can recognize those videos from the thumbnails. So I just find this extremely interesting because it may just well be the unobserved sign, the unnoticed sign, the unrecognized sign Folks, look, if you follow this channel and you know me, you know I don't believe in coincidences. At this particular time, God is going to send us a rare, not just rare, a unique object from deep interstellar space that's going to confuse scientists on many levels, where it's not going to act like a comet, and there's going to be a lot of puzzlement over this object. The timing of it, the 4 colors. I mean, folks, God has already given the scientific community Hubble and James Webb to make, where the discoveries are now being made that cause them to question their entire model of the creation of the universe. And now we've got this. I don't want to. I don't want to let. I can't not mention this. So I don't really know what else really much to say about it, except that I just want to emphasize the fact that God is in control. He said that there would be signs in the heavens, observable signs. That's not the word blepo. That's the word arao, okay, I believe. That's the more physical seeing. So we've got the blepo, we've got the internal, look at it this way, internal seeing, the outward physical seeing, both of these at play at this particular time. I do believe that we are, if not going home this month, I believe we are nearing the end without a question. There's no doubt about it. I have never been dogmatic about any date. I've only proposed, right all the way back since I started this channel, right from the beginning, all I've ever done is propose the most logical sequence of days along a timeline based upon the available evidence. That's all I've ever done. I called a timeline bulletproof once because why? What did I mean by bulletproof? That this was, I was dogmatic about the date? No, but that the factual data concerning the timeline was correct, which it was. It's bulletproof, and no one could disprove that. It is amazing where we've traveled, where we've come since 2017. This channel began in 2016. And where we've come since then, now this September 23rd being the eight-year anniversary of the Revelation 12 sign, just think about everything that's occurred, everything that's taken place. And the number of people, the number of watchmen, the number of Christians around the world that had their sights set on September 23rd. The 4 colors, the colors of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Really? This is a fascinating connection to draw, folks, and it adds a powerful layer of symbolism to the scientific observations of Three-Eye Atlas. It's a wonderful example of how we often use mythology and narrative to make sense of and add meaning to real-world phenomena. The colors of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, as traditionally interpreted from the book of Revelation chapter 6, they are white, that's conquest, pestilence, red is war, black's famine, pale green is death. Just compare these to the color progression of Comet Three-Eye Atlas, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You know, that transformation to emerald green, that aligns with the color of the 4th horseman, death, who rides a pale or ashen horse. And while the biblical text is not specific about a vibrant green, many modern interpretations and artistic depictions show death's horse as a sickly greenish color. The green color, no, believe me, I know horses and that ain't normal, okay? So that makes the parallel to death particularly fitting. Then you have the white stage. This matches the color of the first horseman, Conquest, or Pestilence, who rides a white horse. And this in the final brilliant white phase would represent the comet's peak activity. It's full power unleashed as it makes its closest approach to the sun. Just the sheer brightness and the overwhelming nature of this phase could be seen as the final all-consuming force, a conquest of the space that it occupies. The sequence of the comet's colors, black, red, green, white, and the sequence of the horseman's colors, black, red, green, pale, are very similar, folks. It's a striking coincidence that connects a modern scientific mystery with a powerful ancient narrative, okay? And while one's a natural astronomical process and the other is a spiritual allegory, the parallel is a compelling way to frame the extraordinary and ominous journey of this interstellar visitor. I think this brings a layer of theological and spiritual interpretation to the scientific observations. You know, if you view this not as a coincidence but as a sign, then the entire phenomenon of Comet 3I Atlas takes on a completely different meaning. This perspective is rooted in long tradition of interpreting astronomical events as divine messages from God. You know, throughout history, cultures all across the globe have seen comets and eclipses and meteor showers, not as mere physical phenomena, but as signs in the heavens, delivering prophecies or warnings. And so from this spiritual viewpoint, the color progression of 3I Atlas would not be a random outcome of chemical and physical processes, but a deliberate and intentional sequence. The order, black, red, green, white, their correspondence to the four horsemen of the apocalypse would be the core of the message. I'll tell you how I kind of look at the final change from green to white. I think it represents the entity's, whatever you want to call that thing, its ultimate pure form of destructive power and its ascension to a higher state, you know, the kingdom, I guess you could say. The conquering king. Okay? The whiteness. Well, that's just the chilling reality of it. It's we are definitely living in unprecedented times. I want to take a moment to thank you all for following us through all our verse-by-verse studies over the years. That's been a great encouragement to me. I hope that somehow you've been helped by those studies. We're going to continue on. Watching, waiting, praying for what we all know is going to occur. Look, I love you all. I truly do. Rest in Him above all. I mean, trust Him in all circumstances. That's what He desires the most from us. Till next time, thanks for watching.